Just let people know we're doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to have this opportunity. This is going to be a great opportunity for us to have a conversation. So my name is Galen DeLeo. I'm the priest in charge of Holy Trinity here in Inwood. It's an Episcopal parish. I arrived here in September, about the same time our sanctuary was completed, and have found this neighborhood to be very exciting, full of vitality, which means noise, right? It's the new building that we have is ADA compliant, it's energy efficient, has a refurbished organ, and provides greater soundproof reduction, and can be used as a performance and even as an interfaith worship space. I am so glad to be here. Now, early in my tenure, I had the opportunity to meet Tanya Bonner, and who was on Community Board 12, and we had a long talk about how congregations and faith communities can enhance the quality of life in their environment. Now, I'm a member of a dispersed religious community in the Benedictine tradition, and our charism is to build healthy communities in the city through a combination of practices around prayer and action that emphasize stability, listening, and openness to change. And this includes regular habits of reflection. And reflection tends to be easier with patterns of silence. So thinking about noise and health is a practical consideration to me. So how can I hear God through all the noise? Of course, being in a city means there will always be some degree of noise. Since I've lived here, I've had the regular experience during the week of waking up to construction. And of course, I say a little prayer whenever I hear an ambulance or a fire truck. These are normal. I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by a number of parks where quiet is more easily attainable, but especially in a society with media overload, even light pollution, I wonder how much my brain is being scrambled by light, screen time, air quality, and noise. And this is where a conversation begins. So I'd like to introduce both my co-host and the two presenters and a local leader and activist. And before I begin, I want to ask everyone to mute themselves. The two presenters will share their presentations when they are done, and they can respond to each other. We'll begin with Dr. Bronsaft. Feel free to comment in the chat, and we will allow some questions from the chat after the presentations. This is being recorded. And now our guests. Dr. Bronsaft is a professor emerita of the City University of New York and a researcher, public advocate, and consultant on the effects of noise worldwide for 5 decades. In her hometown of New York City, she has been continuously appointed by 5 New York City mayors to the board of Grow New York City, where she oversees its noise activities, and assisted in the 2007 revision of New York City's noise code. Dr. Bronsaft has conducted landmark research on impacts of transit noise in classroom learning and on airport-related noise on the health of residents living near airports. She co-authored the 2011 book, Why Noise Matters, and the children's book, Listen to the Raindrops. Dr. Bronsaft has been interviewed and quoted extensively in the media, especially for her pioneering research on the impacts of transportation noise on classroom learning. She is a recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychological Association. Dr. Marcus Hilpert is the Associate Professor of Environmental Health Sciences at Columbia University. He is an engineer by training, but his current research also focuses on the adverse impacts of environmental pollution on health. Current research projects include electronic cigarettes, fuel emission from gas stations, and traffic-related air pollution and noise. He has provided input to policymakers at the Maryland Department of Environment, the Maryland General Assembly, and the Department of Energy and Environment in the District of Columbia, and the Ozone Transport Commission. His research has also drawn attention by lawmakers in New York City. And earlier this month, Congressman Richie Torres cited a research study led by Dr. Hilpert that showed that traffic congestion increased in the South Bronx. Tanya Bonner is a writer, social policy, media, and DEI consultant, and university professor who has been active in community-based advocacy work in the city, including around community concerns about excessive noise and erosion of quality of life since moving to Washington Heights 16 years ago. As a board member of Community Board 12, Manhattan, which represents Washington Heights and Inwood, she has been a fierce advocate of equity and justice and fostering a healthy community that enables all its diverse residents to feel safe, welcomed, and to thrive. In the fall of 2020, Tanya Bonner co-founded and currently chairs the WaHI-Inwood Task Force on Noise, a community-led group that convened a diverse group of community residents, business owners, public health scholars, and other stakeholders to find solutions to excessive noise that had heightened in the community. And after meeting with numerous city agencies, elected officials, community residents, and groups, the task force publicly released in May 2021 a list of 29 recommendations to the city of ways to curb excessive noise issues. In the summer of 2021, Bonner also founded NYC United Against Noise, a citywide coalition of various community groups, activists, and not-for-profits working on excessive noise and other quality of life issues in their communities. And we also have Graham Serralo, who is here from Church of the Good Shepherd, who is a local community leader, also concerned with standard of life issues and also building our community to be a place that is healthy as well. All right, so now that we've introduced everyone, Arlene,
Yes.
I would love to have you give your presentation at this point.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Thank you. Now, of all the people here today, I probably have the longest ties to the Inwood community. And actually, I owe my career on noise to the Inwood community. So let me say either thank you, or maybe the people who feel I advocate too strongly for noise pollution would not thank you. So where did it start? As a college professor, I was giving a talk on noise in my class at Lehman College in the Bronx, when a student after class said to me, "Dr. Bronzaft, we have a noise problem in our community. Can you help us?" And where did she live? Inwood. And what was the problem? Her child and the other children in that classroom were being intruded upon by the elevated train noise, and they felt they were not able to learn. And actually, the teachers had a difficult time teaching. And when was this? Over 45 years ago. She said, "Can you help us?" She said, "We're going to sue the city of New York because their noise is preventing our children from learning." As the wife of an attorney, I told her very quickly, you need data to prove that the children are not doing well in the classrooms. And she said, "Can you help us?" And fortunately, the school, Public School 98, had a principal who was an activist. Now we're going back to the 70s. And I asked him for the reading scores of the children adjacent to the tracks and the reading scores of the children on the quiet side of the building to see if I can make a comparison, if indeed the children were being adversely impacted. And by the 6th grade, the children were nearly a year behind in reading. That was significant. Now I'm an academic. I duly published the paper in a peer-reviewed journal. But guess what? I did not help the children in Inwood. And that's what the mother in my class had asked me to do. And so, with the community supporting me, and they were very supportive, with the public officials supporting me, and the media jumped all over this. Our children are not learning because of noisy trains. I was able to go to the Transit Authority and persuaded them to test out a new procedure to quiet the noise on the tracks adjacent to the school. And they agreed. I went to the Board of Ed and we got acoustical tile ceilings. Now, people say to me, how did you get two agencies like that to respond to you so quickly, Dr. Bronzaft? And here's the word I've always used, miracles. Do you believe in miracles? I do. And so now they quieted the tracks. And guess what? I was asked to go back to see if it made a difference. Did I really have to go back? Did I really have to do the study? My 8-year-old daughter, when she found out what her mother was doing, said, Mommy, how could children learn in noisy classrooms? It turned out that children now on both sides of the building were reading at the same level. And the teachers were so much more comforted by the fact that they could now teach. This community, with those two studies, which are now considered the landmark studies, they're even called famous, which is very nice. They don't always quote the author of the two studies. The studies are that important. But they laid the groundwork for the research on the impact of noise on children's well-being. Because if you can't learn and you have to sit in a noisy room, it isn't just your reading that's losing out. Your mental health is losing out as well. And so this community set these two studies and made them not only famous, but they were the yardsticks by which other communities looked at noise and the impact on their children's learning. And one mother called me and said, can I use it for airport noise? We live in the path of an aircraft, and the school children are affected. I said, yes. And let me tell you, these studies were really remarkable. In fact, the FAA spent nearly $400 million to quiet schools near airports. And let me just go back. Did the TA just quiet that school? I asked them to quiet the tracks, not only near all the 50 plus schools in the city of New York, but the tracks near all the homes of the people who had to live with elevated train noise. And the TA agreed. So how do I feel about this community? You started it all for me. Those two studies led to 40 years of research, including the effect of aircraft noise on people's health and well-being, including my working with communities, not only here in New York City or nationally, but internationally. I work with groups all over the world. And my life was changed considerably by this community because it turned me into a person that not only published a paper on the effects of noise on children's learning, but also became an advocate. It also got me to work with communities. And academics contribute significantly. Academics do the research. We need the research to make the changes. But I also believe that academics should go one step further. They have to advocate. They have to work with communities. And that's why the American Psychological Association awarded me that achievement award, because I feel that we have a responsibility to people. So now let's look at where we are. It is 2022. And am I giving a talk on noise and the effects on people? My daughter just left me a half hour ago. My daughter is now 56. She says, Mom, you're still talking about this, right? I said, yes, darling. She said, I guess you haven't accomplished much in the last 45 years. People haven't listened to you. I said, no, I've accomplished a little bit. And I do think more people are listening. What has happened in the last 45 years is that the research and the data, and I'm glad that Dr. Hilpert is joining us today, the research and the data are very strong today. We know noise affects people's health. We know noise affects cardiovascular disorders. If you're living near an airport with constant aircraft overhead, you have an increased risk of being admitted to a hospital for cardiovascular disorders. We know it causes stress. We know it intrudes on sleep. And without sleep, we can't be healthy. It not only affects children at school, but my grandson lives in Queens. and he is awakened at 5:40 in the morning by an aircraft over his head. Must the 16-year-old child be awakened at that hour? And today, when I talked to my daughter and son-in-law when they were here, they live in Queens, and my son-in-law says it's getting worse and worse, and he started complaining to me. So I not only hear it from communities, I hear it from my own children and my grandchild. So what I'm saying is we've got the literature, we've got the data, we know what to do. What we lack is the will. And the person who said it before I said it was Russell Train, who was a former EPA administrator. And he said to a group of aircraft people that we know what to do. We lack the will. Let's get on with the job. And today we are dealing with community noises. We're dealing with motor vehicle sounds. We're dealing with the blasting of horns, sirens. We are still dealing with noise. I must say that we do have some legislation, and I'm not going to go into the specific legislation introduced by the state, but it's called the Sleep Act, which is trying to curb some of this vehicle noise. We actually have a study at DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, that is testing out a noise camera, so we don't have to depend on the police to issue the violations. We hope to capture the license plate as that person blasts through that corner, because enforcement is a problem. So I will continue to work with this group. How could I stop? I've been doing it for 45 years, but let me ask one thing in terms of religion. So much noise can be stopped if people respected each other. I thought the Bible said, do unto others what others should do unto you. I will not blast my music from a car and disturb the people in the community. I will not jump up and down on a rug above the heads of the people below me. I will not blast the music from my music venue so that the people in the community have to hear it. If you believe, as I do, that people must be kind to others, the Bible asks us to, but you know what? A human being should know he or she has to. And if we respected each other, and if the government respected the people, if the FAA respected the people, if they had some true religion in their hearts and souls, then they would not impose the hazard of noise on individuals, robbing them of a decent health and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bronsaft. That was incredibly important to hear, and thank you for all your research. It's made things better. Your impact has changed lives.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so, and we'll continue having this discussion, and so please, people free to respond in the comments. And now we're going to move to Professor Hilpert to offer his presentation. So, thank you.
You know, there's not really much that I can add to Dr. Bronsaft's presentation. She addressed all the important issues. So I will also mention, so Columbia University came as a team today. So Miss Holly Howe, whom you can see on Zoom, is a Masters of Public Health student in our department at Columbia University. And she is planning to do summer research on noise levels in New York City, in the South Bronx, and in Washington Heights and Inwood. So I want to share my screen, and let me just see whether that works. So I just prepared about 12 slides. And one thing that I also want to mention, so I work in Washington Heights at Columbia University on 168th Street. I'm kind of familiar with the noise problems in Washington Heights and Inwood, and I'm very proud to report that I do not contribute much to these noise problems. I'm commuting by bicycle through these two neighborhoods to Riverdale, where I live. So I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in Washington Heights, Inwood during the daytime, not so much at night because we still have children. So I'm usually at home at night and not commuting. And well, I'm a proud member of this task force, which really has already achieved remarkable things. So I remember actually, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, where there was really extremely loud music at the marina in Inwood. And that almost immediately stopped after the task force stepped in. And I think it's primarily Tanya Bonner who talked to the relevant parties. And then a police car was placed there for a couple of weeks and there was no problem anymore. So this task force is extremely efficient. So I want to talk a little bit about noise and health effects of noise. And just to be sure, can you see this noise level meter? Good, because Zoom is sometimes tricking me together with PowerPoint. So how do we measure noise? So we use noise level meters, and you see here one. So just for the size, so this little piece of stainless steel is about 1/2 of an inch in diameter, and that's the microphone of the noise level meter, which basically converts pressure fluctuations due to the noise into an electrical signal. And from the electrical signal, you can determine the noise levels. What's also important when you work with these noise level meters is that you need to calibrate them with a known source of noise to make sure that you have accurate measurements. So that's important for any measurement to characterize noise exposure. I just want to talk a little bit about how we quantify noise. So usually we use units of decibels in order to quantify noise. And decibels are basically, they measure the sound level pressure that's here shown as the little symbol P, and we apply a mathematical operation. We take the logarithm, and that gives us the noise level, which is with units of decibels. And just to give you an understanding what different types of noises in which noise levels they result. So for example, if you are in a classroom, you have a noise level of about 70 decibels. If you have a jet taking off, it's 130, and so on. You see here everything 0 decibels. So that's the threshold of hearing of somebody who does not have hearing loss. So it's important, at least for me, to kind of get a good understanding. If somebody tells you, well, that's 83 decibels, so you want to get an understanding what that really means. And that bar here, that thermometer on the right side, helps you a little bit with that. So another important quantity or numerical value of noise level is the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, safe hearing limit. And EPA stated that if you are not exceeded to noise more than 70 decibels, so then you can expect not to have any hearing loss. So 70 decibels, so that's kind of an important quantity, an important number when you look at noise levels measured in the city. What is also important when you are comparing different noise levels, what does it mean if you have 80 versus 70 decibels. So an important rule is if you are increasing the noise level by 3 decibels, then you are doubling the sound intensity. So for example, if you have a street with 100 cars per hour passing through per hour, and if you go from 100 to 200 cars, so that increases noise levels by 3 decibels. Meaning if you increase the noise levels by 9 decibels, that's 8 times more cars. So a 10 decibel difference in noise levels is a lot. Okay. So we have different kinds of noise sources, and many of them were identified through the Noise Task Force. So in Washington Heights, for example, we have to deal with fireworks, general road traffic, dirt bikes, airplanes, subway, and railroad where Dr. Bronseth worked on, also jet skis. Music is also a big issue, for example, at the marina, which I mentioned. So each noise source can differ in several respects. So the frequency spectrum, at which time of the day, how often it occurs, and then you can have different levels of annoyance depending on the noise source. And what's even more important than annoyance, you can also have adverse health impacts. So from an academic perspective, it's also important to recognize that noise sources come often associated with other environmental stressors. For example, road traffic, you also have air pollution. Okay, so these are 2 slides to show you something that you already know. It's loud in New York City, but as Dr. Bronseth already mentioned, sometimes it's important to put numbers on that if you're talking to policymakers, that they cannot say, oh no, that's not true. Okay, even though it's obvious, so the New York City Department of Health measured noise levels in New York City. So that was a study that was published in 2014. And so they measured noise everywhere where you see the blue dots, and not too surprisingly, so the noise levels measured at those locations very often exceeded the 70 decibel safe hearing limit that was set by EPA. So we also measured noise levels later on in a study in the South Bronx. So that's my main field site in New York City. So we measured noise levels at 8 locations. And what we found in our study, that at 4 out of the 8 locations, the 70 decibel safe hearing limit was exceeded, and also at locations where people live. So it is a big problem, noise in New York City. So I want to talk a little bit about noise effects. So Dr. Bronseth already mentioned most of them. So there are different health effects that you might have. So if noise levels are very high, so you might experience hearing loss. So you might also experience ringing in the ears or tinnitus. So you might experience annoyance, which is strictly speaking not a health issue. You might experience sleep disturbances, which is a health issue. We will get to that. You might experience cognitive impairment, which is a health issue, cardiovascular disease, and in the worst case, exposure to excessive noise levels is associated with death. So what we know for sure is that noise increases the risk of hypertension. And that is very important because hypertension is by itself not a good thing, but even worse, it's a precondition for more severe health outcomes, including stroke and heart attack. And so there are many studies out there that show that noise increases blood pressure on the long term, not only acutely when you are exposed to the noise source, but also after the noise source is being removed, and then it becomes a real precondition. And so we are really in a different situation than 40 years ago when Dr. Brunsoft published her first study. So today there are many more health studies that show that being exposed to noise has adverse health impacts. So for example, this study that we look at here has shown that if you compare two populations and one population is exposed to noise levels that are 10 decibels higher. So 10 decibels, thinking again, okay, 9 decibels more, that's 8 times more vehicles per hour. So that's quite a bit. So if you compare these two populations, so then the population that is increased to the higher noise levels has about 10% higher risk of having hypertension. And again, that's a precondition. So now another study, now we are getting to more severe health outcomes that can be deadly. So that's a study that associated increased noise levels with the risk of heart attack. And what they found is if you're comparing two populations, and again, one population is exposed to noise levels that are 10 decibels higher, so then you have a hazard ratio of 1.14, which means you have a 14% higher chance of getting a heart attack. And that's quite significant, a 14% increased chance of having a potentially deadly outcome. So noise, so the health effects of noise can be very significant. So this is a very important environmental stressor. So then we also know that noise impairs cognition. So these are actually results obtained by Dr. Brunsoft. So she has compared reading scores obtained in quiet classrooms, so that's the blue box, versus reading scores in noisy classrooms. So these are 10 different classrooms, one on the noisy side of the school building and one on the quiet side of the school building. And you can easily see that the reading scores in the blue box here are much higher than the reading scores in the red box. So we know for sure noise impairs cognition in a way, everybody knows, but you need to show it, you need to get the numbers in order to advocate for change. And it was really a landmark study. So then sleep disturbance, that's another thing. Everybody knows that if a loud motorcycle is zooming through in the morning, people wake up, but you still need to show that it's actually happening. And yes, research studies have shown that noise disturbs sleep. But what's more important is research studies have also clearly shown that noise affects your health. So it affects the coordination between your brain or senses and your motion. It also affects learning and memory. It affects risk-taking behavior. So you might die as a consequence of being exposed to noise. It affects signal detection performance, which you also need in your daily life to survive. And as a consequence, sleep disturbance increases the risks of accident. And again, your life is at risk. So today we are really kind of in a position quite different than compared to 40 or 45 years ago. So noise is not only an annoyance. That's already important, in my opinion. If you are annoyed by noise for no good reason, that it should stop, if it's possible to stop it. But today we know noise adversely affects your health. It's a big issue in Washington Heights and Inwood because it's very densely populated, these two neighborhoods. And again, I want to mention, so we hope that we perform this summer measurements in New York City in order to characterize noise levels. So one thing that I'm especially after having spent time in the neighborhood, I think really the big annoyances in Washington Heights and Inwood, and it's not only annoyance, again, it's public health impact, but I think there are many super emitters of noise in the neighborhood. And what we want to do over the summer is to we already identified the super emitters through the work of the task force, but we also want to put numbers on them, how loud they actually are and how often they occur. And maybe that can then inform the advocacy process. And with that, well, I will be happy to take questions later on after the other panelists talked.
Thank you, Professor. It's so important. I'm so glad you were able to reinforce and give us some of the technical discussion on counting decibels and the like. That's extraordinarily helpful, and will be helpful for us and for me to understand. And at this point, I would like to invite Tanya Bonner to actually share her own story about noise, and that's possible. I'm trying to get her. Okay. 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 Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, the Holy Trinity, for collaborating with us for this event. You all are truly, embodying community and being a partner and helping us to address, the issues that are important to our community members. And so we thank you for that, and look forward to continued work with you. And I also just want to thank Dr. Hilpert and Dr. Bronzev, whom I refer to affectionately as Marcus and Arlene, for their work with us for 2 years now on the WaHI-Inwood Task Force on Noise. They've been amazing in educating us as a task force and also helping to educate other community stakeholders about noise and the impact on our communities and helping us craft solutions to this potential solutions to this problem. I'm just going to kind of go for my notes because, just want to make sure I don't forget any points. So, apologies, but I have to always refer to my notes. But as Guan said, I'm Tanya Bonner, and I've been a community resident for 16 years here in Washington Heights. I'm also a practicing Zen Buddhist. So we value meditation and quiet and reflection, which comes with silence. And I understand in my life as a Buddhist how important that is and has been for me to have that time to reflect, to think, and how it helps us to sort of take a beat before we begin to delve into important issues. So it's been a life-saving thing for me as far as my life, life-changing. And so just want to throw it out there. But as some of you, as already been mentioned, I am also a board member with Community Board 12, where I've been, as mentioned, an advocate for not only transforming our board, at least trying to, into a more healthy place, but also the community at large as well. This has been a very, very important aspect for me. When I moved here, there were a number of divisions, and there still are, unfortunately, that I said when I first joined the community board that I wanted to address, because for us to have a healthy community, we need to be able to be in community together and to support each other and help each other. So I've been advocating, this goes back a long time, just so people know, I've been advocating about excessive noise in this community for many years. I always joke that back in 2009, before I even knew Dr. Bronzef, I sent her a urgent email, help, I heard of you, and I don't know how I found her email. I Googled, did some research, and I said, we need help. This is really getting bad. And she responded to me. And so it's sort of, really heartening in full circle to have her be a part of this effort, formal effort to address these issues. So I too lived through the trauma of extremely excessive noise in 2020 and 2021, which we also, were dealing with COVID, but we had a soundtrack to that COVID, 24/7, fireworks, dirt bikes, altered mufflers, large outdoor gatherings, etc. That was our soundtrack during a major pandemic. And it went on 24/7 for months and months and months and months. And we're still dealing with those issues. As many of our community residents and my professional obligations necessitate the need for proper sleep, and of course, the ability to work from home when needed. In 2020, I co-founded with community residents of the task force, WaHI-Inwood Task Force on Noise. This is an independent community-led effort, that is solely community-led, that is trying to bring awareness, as we're doing today, about the health and safety impacts of excessive noise on our community. And we also, over the last 2 years, we have brought together city agencies that are tasked with enforcement, elected officials, community residents, business owners, and others together to explore solutions and to establish accountability around these issues, because accountability is very important. We can't do anything unless people realize that something needs to be done and that someone is accountable to making sure that happens. I also founded the NYC United Against Noise, which Guan said, which brings together community activists and groups citywide. We realized people were starting to reach out to our task force as we were in the media, doing a lot of interviews, really out there in the community, other communities in New York, other areas, the East Side, Chinatown, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, were reaching out to us because they were interested in how we were organizing together to really address these issues. And so knowing that and seeing that we all as a city are concerned about excessive noise and are being impacted, some of us impacted in certain ways and others, but together we are, impacted. We realize the importance of bringing us all together to support the work and to advocate together. And so that's what we've done. And we are continuing that work. Now, I want to talk about, which we mentioned if some of you seen the flyer of this event, the beloved community, because I think that is what we are striving today by bringing together faith leaders and other activists in the community, as well as the community, to really talk about how we can create a community that can thrive, and where people can thrive and where it's healthy for everyone. So the term beloved community was first coined by philosopher and theologian Josiah Royce, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and was later made popular, as many of you know, by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a doctoral student actually in the 1950s at Boston University, where the term of the beloved community was a part of that vocabulary of that university school of theology. So just a little bit of history there. So Royce characterized the beloved community as a spiritual or divine community capable of achieving the highest good as well as the common good. So Royce believed that everything we do should be tested through the lens of whether it will contribute to the creation and sustenance of a beloved community. He believed that each individual should strive for this goal. As we have said, this event today is one way for us to ask ourselves as a community if and how we are creating that beloved community that is healthy, non-toxic, and has a foundation that supports the health, growth, and thriving of all of us. because we surely aren't doing that when buildings are being burned down due to illegal fireworks, which happened in Inwood. When we are keeping elderly, the sick, school children, and working people from proper sleep, and when we are traumatizing veterans, some of whom reached out to me in desperation because it was triggering PTSD from the fireworks. So there has to be a better way. And I feel our faith community can play a vital role in helping us come up with solutions that will help us to achieve and maintain that beloved community. And so I'm honored to have us, start this process out today by doing this first convening of us and some members of our faith community with our community to figure out how they can help us to navigate the challenges around addressing excessive noise in our community. And I want to thank all the people who are here today. It shows that, we appreciate you, all our community members out there. We see that you care, you're here. It takes a village. And, I appreciate you. I see you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's really important. That idea of the beloved community is why I'm here. It's absolutely, and I think the more faith communities can be involved, maybe we can leverage our relationships to move things forward. And so in that, with that in mind, we have Graham Siralu. Please, if you would pronounce your name for everyone.
It's Siralo.
Siralo.
Yes. No, it's okay. It's pronounced a million different ways, and I actually accept 99% of them. So I really do appreciate you inviting me, Tanya, and thank you all. There's a lot to unpack here, and I really appreciate the work and presentation of Dr. Bonsaft and Hilpert on the effect noise has on people, because it's so true, and we have to understand what it does and why it's so important. But then there's the other dynamic. Why is this happening, and what do we do about it? So I'm involved in a number of areas in the community. I primarily consider myself an organizer. I co-founded and I'm the board chair of Altagracia Faith and Justice Works, which is a lay Catholic organization in Upper Manhattan, operating out of St. Jude, the Church of St. Jude. I also had been a co-founder in 2017 of the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Ministry, which is a social justice ministry at Good Shepherd Church, also in Inwood. I lived in Inwood for many years on the corner of Seaman and Dykeman. So I was in ground zero of Noise World, and that's important. I'll get back to that. And around the corner from Holy Trinity. And I knew Jake Dell very well, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Reverend Gowan. So why is this happening? So one thing I want to make clear is that this is not the weather. This is not something that just happens. It's not even, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like structural pollution from a highway or there's been an intentional effort for well over a decade to turn Inwood and Washington Heights into tourist destinations and nightlife destinations. This was begun primarily by the previous council member, Idanis Rodriguez, who's on record for saying he had a goal to turn Inwood into a Latino nightlife destination, food destination. So we can't pretend that there's not a connection between the noise and the proliferation of nightlife establishments in the community. These are the difficult conversations people either avoid having or that could go can degenerate very, very quickly. And often those degenerate into charges of racism in our community, charges of being anti-Dominican, and it gets ugly fast. So that actually intimidates a lot of people from not bringing it up, but it is very much the truth. And we saw this, I could say, from the time I've lived, early 2010s to I moved to Washington Heights a year ago. I saw my neighborhood in Inwood just degenerate in terms of noise and chaos exponentially over that time. And that coincided with the building up of the nightlife industry. And that nightlife industry is geared towards tourists. Now, you will hear that, well, these are Dominican businesses for Dominicans, but it's mostly people coming in from outside. It's the Bronx, coming in from New Jersey, so it becomes a nightlife destination. So you're seeing the kind of crowds and the kind of folks driving in on the motorcycles, people driving in, people who are not really connected to the community, who don't really care if they're going to be revving an engine outside your because their parents don't live there and they don't care. So we would have individuals just sit outside middle of the night, just revving up their and what does that do? Well, what it does is I'm also a tenant organizer. The tenants in my building who are also under incredible stress from fires, from poor maintenance, from all of the from the horrendous behavior of our landlord, we're also being driven literally out of their minds by the noise that was outside. And having a woman, 2 floors down, who's elderly, telling you she can't sleep and she's going on the verge of suicide, gives you a sense of how serious this problem is. So it's a tenant rights issue as well. And I've been a tenant organizer for many years. It's an issue that the tenant movement shies a little bit away from, in my opinion, because it's not the the cool let's fight the landlord thing. And there's a lot of stigma intentionally around pushing back against noise. There's of course, the more recent, shockingly ageist and and sexist characterization of the Karen. So if you are upset or complaining about noise, you are slurred and slandered. And you're seeing this by people who have an interest in the development of this industry and the perpetuation of the situation. You'll see that on the community board. Watching the community board for years, I've seen how the liquor licenses, help me out, Tanya, what's the name of the committee? The licensing committee.
The licensing committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
licensing committee and the business development committee have changed hands into people that almost unanimously support ever expanding nightlife, and who are particularly vicious to people who push back. So this isn't just something that's happening like for no reason, or just an act of God. This is, people are making these decisions and making investments in this problem. There's winners and losers here. The losers are the residents who live in the buildings around them, of all demographics. And I think that, well, what do you do about it? So people who are, you see people who get angry at community board meetings, who show up to meetings like this. And, I've seen people get very inappropriate as well and make genuinely offensive comments. But for the most part, people act alone and then they get targeted. And that's a reality we have. So we're up against a political establishment that has a definite interest in promoting ever growing nightlife, and also defending or obfuscating or pushing off and pretending that the other problems don't exist. And that's easy to do when it doesn't affect you. So one of the things I could say that happened in the last year, I moved from Seaman and Dykeman for many reasons, the fires that we were having, the landlord abuses, and the noise, to Cabrini and 187th, okay? The change could not be starker. The only thing that wakes me up now are birds. I don't hear a peep, okay? Anybody who's familiar with Washington Heights and Inwood what can you say about Seaman and Dykeman and Cabrini and 187th? Okay, where we are is much more affluent now and much more white. And this is an area that they have not promoted nightlife to the degree that they have promoted nightlife in the rest of the district. And this is an area that also has more tools and resources to fight back. So I think that, you know, this is an economic issue. This is a racial justice issue. This is a tenant rights issue. And so this is an organizing issue. And I'll just end by saying, how do you organize against this? And when we're talking about faith-based communities, I've been a faith-based organizer for a long time. Faith-based organizing is a tricky thing. It could be very slow to get up and moving, but once it does, it moves at it's so powerful. And what I could say is that what do our uptown politicians fear, and the people that invest in these nightlife industry, what do they fear? They fear faith communities. They're terrified of faith communities, because faith communities, when they mobilize, come out. They come out with moral authority. They come out with numbers. They come out with the authority of people who are living and investing in the community for many years. And we have the power to just blow them away. And so there's an attempt also to avoid triggering or to blackmail or to do a lot of things to keep faith communities from getting involved. So, you know, and no, it's so when they call it a white privilege problem, that's a redirection. I saw that in the it's not. I lived in a building where if there's one thing uniting everybody by background and ethnicity, it was that everybody was being driven nuts by the noise. But that's an easy way to divide and conquer, is to you know, make it that issue. But anyway, I think that faith-based organizing has tremendous potential to push back on this problem. The question is, how do we get there, and how are we going to do it, and can we organize our people to do the work? So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Graham. And I'm going to have Arlene talk. I just want to mention this panel is so amazing because we brought together both the data, the hard data, the studies, the spirituality, and an invitation to organize. And Arlene, do you have any comments as you've reflected on?
Yes, Graham?
Yes.
Hi. Let me tell you, before I got into this noise business, I was an organizer. I come out of the anti-war movement of the late 60s and early 70s, and also was involved in rent strikes. So I come out of an activist background. Now, you do know we have a nightlife mayor.
Yes.
And have you met with Ariel Pallets?
I have not. And I should say that I think, as you're going to say, this is not confined to just Upper Manhattan, that this is also.
Okay, so let me just come up with a suggestion. When Ariel was named to be the nightlife mayor, she commented that she was very concerned about noise. And that sort of got my ears pricked up. And so I called the person who oversaw her and asked to meet with her immediately. And I did. Ariel and I did meet, and we did talk about noise. And she's been, you are familiar with the mediation board that she heads?
I'm familiar with it.
Yes. So she has been involved. And the few times that I have had dialogue with her on certain situations, she has followed up. Is it enough? No. And so what I might suggest to you is that if we're dealing with a nightlife issue, and by the way, the one place I spoke to about nightlife and music was New Orleans. And if you think we have a tough situation here, I'll welcome you to New Orleans and try to get people to restrict some of the loud music. So I've had quite a number of visits to New Orleans as well. I'd be very much work with you. I would ask that you consider the possibility of meeting with a nightlife person. I think it should have a dialogue. I have never asked the aircraft to stop flying. And remember, when I did my noise study on the elevated trains, I did not tell the trains to stop running. My position was make them quieter. We need the trains, but we need the children in a quieter environment to learn. We fly, but we also have people on the ground impacted. We live in New York City. It is a city that encourages entertainment, music venues, but we also have people living near these. And so my position is, let's try to sit down. Let's try to work it out. Now, I've never been as successful as I was when I did my study 45 years ago. And I don't know if I'd ever be as successful now. It's a different climate, but I think we should try. So if there's some way that I can assist you, please, let's talk about it. And let's address the particular issue you raised of how can we have nightlife and people visiting those venues and yet not intrude on the lives of the people who live there. So if you are willing, Graham, since you're an activist, I am definitely an activist. You can check out what I've done in the late 60s and see if we can work something out. I'd be very willing to work with you. And I thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Together is how we make things happen. We can't do it individually in silos. Tanya, any reflections? And I'm going to ask Marcus right afterwards before moving to a question. So yeah, Tanya.
Yes, I was just going to say, yes, we're about to open it up to our community for questions and comments for everything they've heard so far. But I wanted to say, first, before we do that yes, what we're trying to do today is we know that there's a problem. We've identified the problem. Our scholars today have outlined the issue, and our other panelists have definitely outlined the issue. What we're trying to do today is help to come up with, talk about what are some potential solutions, what are some potential ideas and solutions and things that the community and people think that we should be doing to address this problem. Arlene offered one thing in terms of the person in charge of nightlife. I put in the chat the 29 recommendations that our task force released last May. That was also covered in the media and included many suggestions, including updating the noise code, which hasn't been updated, which basically sets the standard for how noise is enforced in our city. That hasn't been updated for almost two decades. And we have advocated for that. We've also advocated for a specific office in the city that would deal with quality of life issues, similar to a nightlife agency of department, department that would advocate, that would deal with quality of life, maybe a commissioner or a czar that would deal with that would help to bring all of these different entities together to address these issues. We've given many recommendations in terms of that. If you can look at our recommendations, you'll see that we spent, like I said in my statement, many months talking to all of the enforcement agencies, talking to all the elected officials, talking to the community, people who are on the ground doing this work to really come up with those recommendations. And so we think that is one, but we're right that this is a conversation that we need to be having, and we don't, as Graham mentioned, need to get sidetracked by the noise, and I say the noise of division. Everyone in this community, people are concerned about this problem, all different nationalities, races, genders, ages, you name it. We've had everybody at the table. So we don't want to see that happen. We want to understand that this is a public health issue. This is a public safety issue. And we want to come together as a community, understanding that and figuring out what we can do. So, I'd like to open it up, give our community a little bit of time, but I'll turn it back to Gwan to handle that part. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to ask Dr. Hilpert if you have any final, some words you would like to say before we open it up. So.
Yes, so just one point that I want to make. So dealing with community noise is different from other kind of pollution sources that I deal with. So for example, I also deal with emissions from gas stations. And if you think of gasoline emissions from gas stations, there are some states where you can build a gas station next to a residential property. You can build it next to a school, next to a church. So there are no laws, there are no policies out there when it comes to other environmental contaminants. Noise in New York City is actually different. And you know more than I do, but we have many policies and laws in place that already could take care of many of the issues that we are experiencing. So for example, if you're operating a dirt bike without a license plate, that's illegal, not necessarily because of the noise, but because the dirt bike doesn't have insurance. But I think there are many examples of these excessive noise forces. They are simply illegal. So it's not really that there is so much more research needed, to show that there are adverse health impacts. So the laws are already in place, and that's actually, in a way, it's a privilege on one side when compared to chemicals that you want to regulate. And I think we need to focus on how to enforce the law. And we need to ask, I think, particularly for input from the communities on how to do this. And I think to work with the churches provides really a wonderful opportunity to do this, to make sure that any solution that is suggested will be accepted by the local community. So this is, I think, one addition, and I'm sure you are all aware of this.
And that is about power, leveraging our power. And the way we do that is to build broader community networks. So, and at this point, I want to begin to bring in some community questions. Allegra Legrande, you have a few questions and observations. Would you unmute and you can ask those directly? Sure. Great.
Thanks. So my question was about monitoring. And I know Dr. Hilpert mentioned some monitoring arrays that he has, but I was wondering, like a more full monitoring and like real-time data that could be provided for noise level on a block by block basis. Of course, there is that array that he showed from the paper several years ago, but we also have ShotSpotter, which is a noise monitoring array that only needs, if the data should be there, and of all the metrics that the pollution that we complain about, the intensity, the frequency, the time of day, those could also be used to train some sort of neural network to recognize different types of noise, sources of noise, and even track them on a much more granular basis because the array is much more extensive. Or perhaps using some sort of citizen science like validating the NICE noise monitoring equipment against like the NIOSH app on Apple devices to see if we could get a bigger network for monitoring noise, figuring out where it's coming from, exactly when, and with this data have really directed advocacy and interventions to get rid of the worst offenders. And how can we move forward most efficiently from that perspective? Thanks.
Great.
May I?
Of course, I'm going to.
May I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Okay, one of the things I'm working with 2 students at Columbia University and with Tanya, and we were going to do a survey. Not that we are going to try to find out that noise affects health, but it's good for every community to know exactly which noises affect that community and how that affects the community. So we're going to be doing that in this community. The other thing that you talked about citizen science, we are now looking at placing sensors on people's windowsills to measure noise. It's starting with aircraft noise. Dr. Taehyung Park at NYU is working on this experiment and collecting data. And it's going to show what plane comes over a particular home at what time and how loud is it. And that is also starting. And I told you about the noise cameras. So I know that Tanya is working with the students at NYU, and we are preparing the survey for the community. But I want people to know that we are now exploring citizens being able to monitor sounds coming to their homes at what time. There's also another program that's going on at NYU in which Sonic, it's the name of the group, they've put monitors on different corners throughout the city to actually assess the levels of sound in that community and where it's coming from. And that data is being shared with DEP. So as we move forward with noise, it is becoming much more of an issue to which citizens contribute. Just as the Apple Watch, and I have to say my grandson's a big Apple person, that Apple Watch came out with the decibel levels, and people then became more conscious of how loud the sounds were that they were being exposed to. So we are moving in the direction where individuals will have greater control in determining which sound levels are affecting them. And that should give greater ammunition. Let me add one other point. When you talked about nightlife, you implied money was involved. It's, it's a business. When people go to hospitals for cardiovascular disorders and high blood pressure, that costs money. We have to focus that not only is noise a health hazard, but it is such a health hazard that it is draining the dollars from the medical dollars. We're talking dollars that all of us pay in terms of assisting people with medical ailments. Noise is costly to this country. We can only think of the airlines and their expenses to have to reduce the noise. If we view noise as a mental and physical health hazard, then the cost in terms of dollars to ameliorate the symptoms as a result of this hazard is costing all of us. And that's what public officials pay attention to. Dollars. Your public official not attending to the noise issue is not only neglecting your health, but that public official is costing all of his constituents more money to spend on medical issues.
Thank you, Arlene. We're going to have Bernard ask a question, and then we'll go to Graham, and we'll begin to wrap it up.
Okay, I was just going to point out that we have every law we need right now to quiet a bunch of this noise. Not all of it, obviously, but illegal dirt bikes, modified muffler systems, speakers on the street are 100% illegal. You don't need a dB meter. It could be on at a whisper volume. Try taking a guitar. I'm a guitar player. Try taking a guitar down to the street with an amplifier down on the Upper West Side and turn it on, and I'll get visited by the cops within 10 minutes and have the speaker taken away from me if I give them any kind of business. So it's like, it depends upon the community too. I'm dealing personally with a completely illegal situation. It's a cigar bar without even the proper documentation to operate as a cigar bar next door to me over here, throwing parties on the street last night until 4 o'clock in the morning, blasting music, and 4 RMPs came by and did not do anything. And there's a conflict of interest there that I mentioned in the chat. I'm not going to mention on here, but actually it may wind up going public at some point. So when I moved into my building, which is a beautiful brand new building, you know, I looked around, there was no nightclub. There wasn't, you know, I mean, if there was a nightclub there, then I guess I would expect to hear some noise on the weekends. There's no nightclub. It's a cigar bar and 2 hair salons and a shipping company. And they are sponsoring illegal alcohol-driven parties on the sidewalks. No liquor license, no nothing. All it would take is just somebody coming through, writing a bunch of summonses, and maybe taking away the proprietor in handcuffs at some point. You know, that's all it would take. It's not even rocket science. You know, and you know, it's the city. I get it. Listen, I have such bad tinnitus from being on loud stages. I can't even take the country because it's too quiet. You know, I like the city. It's okay. You know, but this is crazy. And they were saying it was going to calm down because, oh, now the nightclubs are open again. But you know what? They haven't taken it to the nightclubs. It's still on the street because there are no tickets being given out. There's nothing. Almost no enforcement. And we don't need more laws. We need enforcement of existing laws. We need enforcement. If they did that, this place would quiet down quite a bit. It wouldn't be
True. So true.
So I want to move on to a couple other people. Sorry to you, Bernard, but like, I think that's a very important point that we need to just enforce the laws. Unless you had a question, but I think that point you made was very important. Okay, we're going to move to actually, Graham. Did you want something?
I just wanted to make a brief comment, but I could yield to Melissa and
okay, great.
Dalia.
So, Melissa, will you have a question? Great, thank you.
Well, thank you first of all for hosting this fantastic panel. I know Professor Bronsept and the wonderful Tanya from New Yorkers Against Noise, and it's great to be here. So one thing that I don't think has been stressed as well is that a lot of the sources of excessive noise pollution are fossil fuel based, whether it's people, you know, in the countryside dealing with the lawnmowers, leaf blowers. And I know that Riverside Park, we had an event there, Mulch Fest, and they were using actually electric mowers, which were fantastic, so much quieter. So the other thing too, is that the illegal ATVs, the dirt bikes that are souped up, I'm dealing with the helicopters. That's pretty much a citywide regional problem. And those for one trip, they take 40 times the amount of gasoline that a car would, and it's jet fuel. And some of them are leaded. So I do think that we need to also, and of course that doesn't apply to the problem with the speakers and the bars, that's different. But a lot of the sources
Yes.
of excessive noise pollution is due to these fossil fuel souped up, those cars. So I would love to, I just wanted to make that point that we are, you know, look, New York City, we had Hurricane Sanda, Ida. We know the effects of catastrophic climate change. And yet the city is they're allowing the helicopters to take off right from Manhattan, 3 heliports right on this island. And they're not focusing on the climate change aspect of that. And the same thing with, you know, so many other things like the leaf blowers in the parks that could be switched over at some point soon, I would think, to the electric. So I just wanted to add that point. And thank you again. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Melissa.
That's true.
And we'll move to Graham.
I think Magdalia.
Yeah,
had-
Magdalia, I'd
Okay,
like to.
Magdalia. Okay, great. So let me get Magdalia here. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question, I think, is most importantly, Community Board 12. Especially their licenses committee, that needs to be addressed like really quick, because I think that's really one of the major problems that we have here. They seem to check off on things with no issues. people can do whatever they want. They eat in restaurants that they shouldn't be eating in. I went to this restaurant and ate the other day. This is how they start their meetings, and I'm taken back by that, because I'm like, you're approving a license that you just went to eat in their restaurant, and what is that all about? So I think that's a big issue here in this community, especially Inwood. Besides all the noise and everything else that people have said today, I think Community B12 needs to be put on blast. They need to be talked to. And I feel that they're rigged, no doubt about it. There's something that the reason why they have all these licenses out here like this, approving all kinds of nonsense in your building, restaurants. I think all of this has a lot to do with that to begin with. That's just my take now. I may be wrong, but when I listen to some of the stuff that they say and how they approve things, somebody's getting paid off.
I see Tanya nodding. She's in there. She's in the.
Somebody's getting paid off.
Do you want to respond to that, Tanya? You have a reflection on that, since you're in the.
I'm sad that Keisha Sutton, Percy Sutton had to get off the call because she's the deputy commissioner under Mark Levine. She was on our call, so she had to get off because she's a mom and she had to take care of some stuff. So, but yes. And of course, we know the borough presidents control the community boards or oversee the community boards. So yes, I do feel and I agree that this is something that I myself have tried to advocate and talk about and bring these issues up, that I think more community people like Magdalia, who I want to thank for being also involved in the very beginning stages of our task force. People might not know, but she was very instrumental and very helpful. So thank you for that. But also, I feel that the community needs to join. The only way we can really make, amplify those concerns that Dolly talked about is for the community to be vocal about it. Come to our meetings, participate in the public session, and bring these things up. The public session is open for the public, so sign up. We have our general meeting coming up next Tuesday at 6:30. Sign up for the public session. Bring these issues to the table. Make your voice heard to the Manhattan Borough President, Mark Levine. Make these issues known. I find that I've been very, very sometimes demoralized by the lack of community voices on these issues. And I find sometimes myself and other community board members, we're fighting alone, trying to get these issues addressed. And people show up for other things, but not for these sort of systemic things that Magdalia is talking about that need to be addressed. So I would love to have more communities coming out and speaking out and addressing these things to help us as board members who are trying to make that happen, because I do think that we as an issue. We had, speaking of a former of Donis Rodriguez, he came to one of our meetings, our general meetings, and was speaking on behalf of a business and promoting that business and saying that we should vote for, and advocate, because this business was actually something that happened, and the board was they were going to deny the renewal of the license, recommend that because of something that happened, and we had him coming advocating for this particular business. And I said, how can we do this when we don't do it for every business? That's showing favoritism for certain businesses, and that's not something we want. And so it's disturbing when we have these sort of things happen. And so I agree. One of the solutions could be that community members speak up more at our community board meetings. Come, attend, sign up for the public session, make your voices heard, call Mark Levine, email Mark Levine, and let them know how you feel. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. Thank you.
Organize. So we are at 1:27. I'm a community organizer who believes you start on time and you end on time. So we're going to end in 3 minutes. Now, Graham, help us out here. There's one person, Cheryl, who did just raise her hand. But if it's short, Cheryl, I'll let you go, and then Graham can kind of send us out. So if you unmute, but I will probably cut you off after a minute. So
okay.
Okay.
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, I'm going to be very quick. I just want to echo what Tanya just said. And I live in the Community Board 12 district. And I have many times gone to the general board meetings, of course, through Zoom. And I have called out actually several members of the community board because I was one time on a meeting and I could see on the Zoom that they were kind of laughing and making fun of what I was saying. And I went to a general board session and I called them out by name. You know, this has got to stop because, you know, people come and they do speak out and they get attacked. So then they don't want to come back and say anything. So yes, I agree with Tanya. We need more people in the community to come to the general board meetings and speak out because this is everybody's community board. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say that we have at least 3 professional community organizers here, and we can talk about how that works. Graham, help us out. And
I just wanted to say, just everybody should go into this with their eyes open, and I think that's already been touched on. You know, Tanya spoke about it very well. I could tell you absolutely the community board is rigged. Idanis community, the council persons have, while the borough president appoints all of the folks on the community board, the council member recommends half of them. And then almost all of them get on, and then the borough president has their thing. Mark, you know, under Adonis Rodriguez, community board 12 went into the sewer. He used to intimidate people to vote his way. Now his chief of staff is the council person. I'm not saying she's doing the same thing, but she's very aligned with the businesses that are involved in these violations. There are community board members who their behavior is atrocious, and Mark Levine needs to be pressured to take action. Gail Brewer, I love her, but she never did. And you have community board members who are online, who are on social media, attacking people. People stand up and pressure Mark Levine, and I wish this person was still here because I'd like her to hear that too. He's not going to get away with this like Gail Brewer did. So start pressuring him. He's a good guy. I like Mark, but he needs to hear it.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I want to especially thank Arlene and Marcus. You know, it is your academic work that gives us the meat so that we can actually take this and use our power to make things happen. And I know that, you know, you're probably doing a lot of research. For you to come out to, you know, talk to us is, you know, I mean, you're doing a lot of the technical work that we need to have happen. And again, Tanya, I'm so glad that we were able to meet and put this together. I mean, it's been you are a great light in this neighborhood. Just the work that you've done has been amazing. And it's wonderful to get to meet you, Graham. And I hope that we can start aligning and working together too, because this is not yet finished. There's a lot we can do. There's a lot that already has been done. I think we have a pretty good idea of how to move forward. And now it's 1:31, 1 minute late. Oh my God. So have a blessed day, enjoy it, and you know, do whatever you need to do to rest, and please go for it. It's great to see all of you. Blessings. Right.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Arlene. Thank you, go on. Thank you, community. Bye.
Bye now. Yeah. Tanya, do you want to stay on for 1 second? Great.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
You might want to stop the recording though.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.